that a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center.
Real threat of the radiation levels right now.
How do they cope with
Just as the school day was ending, the shooting started.
That COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
Coolant action.
And another plane.
Rotterdam.
These things I see.
And another.
really
Injured.
Showing the
More than half a year ago, we entered 2020, a year that many people all around the globe had new or improved intentions. However, most of them had no clue what was about to happen to our society and precious Earth. That's the way how a crisis works. The time you get sense of it, you are too late. And some might question, why would you say it's too late? Our Earth needed a wake-up call for the way we are treating it right now. And others may pledge for the threat that we are encountering for humankind. My name is Sabien van Dijk, and in the upcoming minutes, I would like to enlighten you into the world of crisis. The biggest threat for humanity, or a way towards world's utopia? I am privileged. I have never experienced a crisis before which could affect me or one of my loved ones. Yet, slowly things started to change without the unity knowing this. An unknown virus came closer and got the ability to grow and become a pandemic. I am intrigued by something so small the eye cannot see, but at the same time can influence the whole world. During this outbreak, I followed the news closely. I saw people whom I know getting affected with it. Different news platforms shared diverse messages, and people started to panic, even though our Prime Minister warned us that we should not be afraid. Our country is capable of handling this. However, we will have to adjust to a new normal. In these weeks, I often caught my mind wandered off to a place where I saw different things happening with a distinction between the good and the bad. If there even if so. Nonetheless, I realized my main focus was negative. But is that the truth? On the other hand, I saw beautiful initiatives rise throughout the whole country and even worldwide, where people started helping each other and included the minorities. Why do people tend to act differently under crisis circumstances, which affects inclusivity within society? Since crisis can occur in many different shapes, forms, and expendables, it is difficult to define what it entails. After exploring many possibilities, I agreed with the view of Bachan and Mitrov, who defined the crisis as a disruption that physically affects the system as a whole and threatens its basic assumptions, its subjective sense of self, and its existential core. This shows how adaptable it is, and coming with that, the complexity of it. I felt the heaviness of the topic right away, and I saw a connection with something negative. A crisis is intertwined with cause and effect towards society and organizational structures. However, this is only the tip of the iceberg. As I mentioned earlier, it focuses on the cause and effect and the physical effect, or in other words, on the events. In this way, you will focus on our assumptions and subjective sense of what is about to happen. The difficulty I encountered was that society saw different things happening during and after a crisis. They faced multiple truths. Talking about something which affects the whole society, you cannot say which is the truth. The pessimist and the idealist, linear of each other with their opinions. However, Is that the truth? As a pessimist, which is mostly from an economic perspective, the statement is, crisis brings out the worst in people. We will go back to the natural states of living, which is your own life is the priority. A short article which was published within the many about the happenings concerning the corona crisis confirms this egocentric way of living. A few weeks ago, 150 face masks and 35 bottles of disinfection gel were stolen from an elderly home. To stay updated about these current happenings, you will have to follow the news in some way. However, it is getting more difficult to filter through all these news articles and different platforms who share these news flashes. In times of crisis, misinformation abounds. However, based upon the research of Mercer, most people, around 70%, can distinguish misinformation from the correct information. But what about the other percentages? That means that also people believe in this misinformation. And this will affect them on a personal level. The psychological effect of a crisis is the outcome of this. US Department of Health and Human Services Center for Disease Control and Prevention states that crisis or disaster take control of human life are characterized by the following aspects: change, high levels of uncertainty, and complexity. In addition to these aspects, panic has an important role. Disaster researchers show a correlation between crisis and panic. However, there's often a misconception about this since there is a lack of understanding and unity about the meaning. Often panic and fear are intertwined or seen as the same thing. There is an actual difference between the two that are important for the understanding of how people will react. Panic involves irrational, groundless, and hysterical actions taken with complete disregard for others, while fear makes you aware of the danger you are in and creates an optimal state of sense to make rational decisions and prioritize the necessities. For example, the two hijacked planes who flew into the Twin Towers. The fire department later told the news that there was complete panic, while survivors tell that the majority was serene and that people let others first on the emergency stairs, while they are indeed afraid. There is another truth to the story. The idealist has a sociological perspective and states that crisis brings out the best in people. We will act out of solidarity, help where needed, and bond on a deeper level. Remember the short example about the stolen goods? That same week, this elderly home got overloaded with donations of face masks and disinfection gel with people in the neighborhood. Expert in literature and culture history Lotte Jensen, who is leading research within the impact of historical crisis, explains. The Netherlands have a tradition with fighting crisis. Solidarity is always key in this process, how surprising this might be for some. Jensen claims that crisis does not make a distinction between gender, race, or religion. Most of the times, a crisis can affect everyone. And because of this, solidarity occurs. Historian and journalist Rutger Bregman could not agree more. He did intensive research into the reaction of humanity in situations such as a crisis. Together with the Disaster Research Center, who has done over 700 field studies since 1963, they state that during a crisis, there is never a hurricane of egoism, which is in contradiction to what is proven earlier. For every antisocial person out there, there are thousands of doctors, cleaners, and nurses working around the clock on our behalf. For every panicky hoarder shoving entire supermarket shelves into their cart, 10,000 people are doing their best to prevent the virus from spreading further. The Disaster Research Center is now seeing reports from China and Italy about how the crisis brought people together. We've learned how to accept help from each other, writes a woman living in Wuhan. Because of this quarantine, we have bonded and supported each other in ways that I've never experienced before in the 9 years I am living here. Psychologist David Murphy states that we are much more likely to see pro-social behavior across multiple types of disaster and extreme events. Year after year, politicians have drafted huge piles of legalizations on the assumption that most people are not good, with in many cases inequality, loneliness, and mistrust as an outcome of these policies, if we believe Bregman. You have likely heard of the placebo effect, but you might be less familiar with its opposite. Placebos are medications, or in this case, procedures that appear to be an actual treatment, but they are not. The placebo effect occurs when a placebo makes you feel better or improves your symptoms. The nocebo effect, on the other hand, happens when a placebo makes you feel worse. While there is plenty of research about the placebo effect, the nocebo is still poorly understood. Experts are now looking into the nocebo to have a better understanding of how this affects the psychological health and has a connection to a crisis state. With a sociologic perspective, you could state that our negative view upon society is a nocebo. This statement is correct if you follow the Furnace theory of Frans de Waal, who is a biologist and has been executing research upon the behavior of apes. As earlier mentioned, The Economist suspects that when a crisis occurs, we will go back into our natural way of living, and we would behave like wild animals. We would pretend to do good while we are striving for a better world for ourselves. People who stand behind these ideas would say, and I quote, "Scratch an altruist and watch a hypocrite bleed." This research in primatology allows animals such as chimpanzees, bonobos, and different species to choose for a reward in egoism. He was the only one who would get a treat. Or in socialism, they would both get something. De Waal can state that over 90% would choose for this pro-social option. So, The Economist, who states that we would turn into wild animals and that we would go back into our natural way of living, we would still choose these social options and strive for the goodness in a community. So, if there are this many arguments for both truths, why is the idealist not becoming the pessimist, or the other way around? They encounter different patterns in their daily life, something which is difficult to get out of. To change this, you have to dive into the deepest point of the iceberg, the mental models. Only if you go this deep, you will be able to transform their point of view. With transforming being the process of challenging, altering, or replacing the dominance of existing institutions in a specific social and material context. I would like to describe myself as a changemaker on transformative level. And therefore, I would like to work with my vision of humanity upon a sustainable development goal, such as promote just, peaceful, and an inclusive society in combination with crisis management. To be able to start a movement in this, I will have to find my way between two different approaches, bottom up and top down. The change is meant to be on an individual level, but therefore you need the support of the majority. I have started by doing this research and being convinced. I believe most people are good, and I would like to transform this conflict into an agreement. And you?